Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lukas. Wacker. With me, as always, we have Kyle Cushman. And in today's episode, we are kicking off our fantasy preview for the 2021 NASCAR Cup Series playoffs, beginning this upcoming weekend at Darlington Raceway for the Southern 500. No throwback weekend this time around for the Cup Series, as they had that early.
A couple of schemes are throwback, at least.
I think Matt DiBenedetto's doing one this weekend because they didn't do it in the spring.
One as well. There's a couple in there.
There's a couple of them, but it's not the traditional throwback weekend that we are accustomed to seeing to kick off the playoffs the previous couple of seasons. But we have our fantasy preview coming up, some news and notes to get to as well. And before we get into anything, make sure you go check out our playoff predictions episode that just came out earlier today, where we go into round by round who's going to get eliminated, who's our championship for our dark horse champion, and who's some of the big names that could potentially go out earlier if things don't go their way. And of course, our champion prediction in that one. Loads of fun to do that yesterday. And we're going to keep it rolling here with our fantasy previews from here to the end of the season at Phoenix. But now, how are you doing today, Kyle? We got a busy one and a fun one in store today.
Yeah, I'm doing great. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up on today's episode. We got a lot of playoff stuff, both trucks returning back to the schedule, of course, at Darlington. Was supposed to be at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. Unfortunately, not able to get up here to Canada. A couple of Pinty Series races there this weekend, though, so that's going to be fun nonetheless. But trucks at Darlington again earlier this year. It was a bit of a mess, but last year's playoff race was a lot of fun there. Wasn't a playoff race then, but it was a lot of fun at Darlington with the Truck Series. 750 package for the Cup Series again was awesome, watching the guys try and wheel it around Darlington earlier this season, even though it was kind of the Truex show for a lot of that race. Just seeing them with 2 seconds of fall off on the tires, trying to get through that race without any damage was a lot of fun to watch. So a lot of really, really good stuff coming up this weekend. Of course, we got a new track debuting for Formula One as well. So a lot of really, really good stuff to get to today.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff. Our F1 preview will also be out on the channel, so make sure you go check that one out for the Dutch Grand Prix. But today we're looking at NASCAR for Darlington, the kickoff for the round of 16 here, 750 horsepower package, and looking forward to getting into that fantasy preview a little bit later on. But let's get into the news and notes.
One thing before we get to the news and notes as well, did a shout out last week, so another shout out is in store this week, but not to somebody that I know personally or anything like that. Before we get into things, though, I think it's important to mention Miles Rowe, who was the first African-American to win an IndyCar sanctioned event last weekend at New Jersey Motorsports Park in the USF 2000. Really, really awesome to see him get that win. Part of the Roger Penske initiative for more diversity in motorsports. So great to see him get that first win. Hopefully he can continue up the IndyCar ladder in the coming years, but a great first victory for Rowe last weekend.
And also last weekend, Wendell Scott finally got the Wendell Scott family got their trophy. That was well-deserved. Of course, he did not get the trophy for the only African-American to win in the Cup Series. They did not give him the trophy when he initially won, but now the family has the trophy where it's in its rightful place. So really happy to see NASCAR doing that this previous weekend at Daytona. But for the news and notes, we start off with the big one that happened after we recorded our episode last week. It's Kurt Busch. He has announced his 2022 plans, and he will drive the number 45 for 2311 Racing in 2022. It's a multi-year deal with the team, so he's going to be sticking around for a couple of seasons at least. And this will probably take him to the end of his Cup Series journey in a couple of years' time. But really,
I don't know. We'll see about that.
Maybe, but it just seems like if he was considering maybe retirement, if something didn't pop up this season, then maybe at the end of multi-year here, then that could be the end of his journey in the Cup Series. Not saying that it is, but it could possibly be. It's all signs are, I think, would point in that direction, at least in my opinion. But this is the worst kept secret kind of out there right now. We kind of heard it back all the way back in May from Jordan Bianchi that this was going to be basically coming. But Kurt Busch puts pen to paper, and in the announcement video, they moved the number with the 45 forward on the door. It's not its final placement. We won't get into that in today's episode, but the big news here, Kurt Busch has found his spot, widely speculated and well-deserving of a spot to partner in the JGR kind of stable over there, the Toyota pipeline. And he's going to be over there with his brother, Kyle Busch, for the first time sharing the same manufacturer at the same time. So really looking forward to that. But your thoughts here, Kyle, on Kurt Busch's signing with 2311 Racing?
Yeah, for starters, I don't think there was any scenario where Kurt was done racing going into next season, whether it was in NASCAR or whether it was in sports cars or something. He was going to be racing. It was just a matter of what. he was racing, but it's great to see him land this Cup Series ride. And we've known it for forever. We've talked about it a handful of times when it's popped up here and there. He kind of kept it as a bit of a question mark for a while when he brought up stuff like the Fox booth and having multiple offers and stuff like that. But since May, we've essentially known that he's going to Toyota and he's going to 2311 to partner Bubba Wallace next year. And I'll start on the Kurt side and then go to the 2311 side. Nice move for Kurt here because this is an up and coming team, brand new team. One of the big factors that Kurt has is that he can go to a team and really help them kind of find that next level. We saw him be able to do that to a certain extent at Stewart-Haas Racing with that 41 car. We've seen kind of where it's been since then, significantly down from where Kurt was when he was in that car. We saw at Chip Ganassi Racing. He steps into that one car after Jamie McMurray leaves. Significant step up, 1 win per season since he's been there and has made the playoffs. So we know the level that Kurt Busch is at. We know what he can bring to a team in terms of helping them find that next level. And I really think that this is a nice partnership because 2311 has aspirations of being a championship level team. And when you look at the free agency options that were available for Kurt Busch, there wasn't really anything like that available in the now. So going to a team with a lot of potential, a lot of extenuating circumstances in terms of Kyle being there with the overall manufacturer, going with Bubba Wallace, going with Denny Hamlin, all this kind of stuff. So I really like the move from that perspective for Kurt. For the 2311 side, though, this is an absolute coup when you look at being able to get a driver of the capabilities of Kurt Busch, to put him in a second car, to have him be able to mentor and teach Bubba Wallace as well into the future. This is a really, really solid partnership from both the driver and team side. I'm excited to see what they can do into next year because, of course, we know where they've been at in terms of performance this year, fringe top 20 team, some highlights here and there. But this is the one season that they have to use this car. There was no reason for them to put in a bunch of money into this car for one season when you've got a brand new car coming in next year that you can put that same money into and be good over multiple seasons. So this year was about getting their feet wet, kind of seeing what they've got in that 23 team in terms of personnel and driver. Next year is where it really starts with 2311. And to be able to do that with Bubba Wallace and now Kurt Busch alongside him, that's a very, very interesting prospect going into next season.
Youth and experience is the name of the game over there next season. And like you said,
Bubba isn't like the youngest driver in the world. He's late 20s.
Yeah, but in experience at the Cup Series level in a higher profile ride, I would argue, yes. But for Kurt Busch, I mean, he's every time he's gone to a new team or a little bit more of a midfield team, if you would want to say, he has brought up their game. He's one of the best at getting the most out of it, giving feedback. I think that's what the Busch brothers do incredibly well, is giving feedback and improving their situation. But Kurt Busch, the elder statesman in the sport, he's getting up there. He's one of the oldest guys out there on the Cup Series circuit behind Kevin Harvick. So having somebody like that for 2311 Racing moving forward is going to be massive for their next step here. This was their rookie season, really not too many expectations. We maybe predicted them to make the playoffs in our preseason stuff, but that was probably a bit of a stretch on our part. But looking forward, they probably have the expectations to be a playoff team when you look at some of the guys that maybe made it this time around in 2021. So there's some expectations there now. Kurt Busch is a pretty big name, so they have to try and bring up their game. And I'm sure Kurt Busch will actually really help with that process. So really looking forward to seeing what Kurt Busch can do and how that partnership with Bubba Wallace is really going to grow in the next couple of seasons, at least. How much do they expand over the next couple of seasons with the plans of building the shop in North Carolina there? They already bought the land. So that process is going to be about a year or so in time, maybe for the 2023 season. That may be a bit optimistic, Denny Hamlin said, but there is really big aspirations here from this team. And it's great to see that they're really looking forward from this short-term future here with Kurt Busch to try and get them to a point where after he is done with the team, the next person stepping in is going to have a really, really good car underneath them so that they can go out there and try and contend for a championship in the not so distant future. So really looking forward to seeing all this because this is a move that I've really, really wanted. And I think Kurt Busch is the perfect fit for something like this. He's the age, I think, is not a great representation of what the caliber of driver is. When you think drivers past their 40s, you're a little bit skeptical in their performance. But Kurt Busch has continuously made the playoffs in a Chip Ganassi car. When we see what the second car has usually done, it's been in that 20th point range, let's say. But for Kurt Busch, exceeds expectations when it comes to performance more often than not. And I think he's going to do the exact same thing next season in that 45 car. Obviously, though, charter details were released with part of this announcement as well. The front row stuff is definitely out there. It seems all but confirmed at this point, but that wasn't a part of this announcement with Kurt Busch. So still waiting on where that charter is going to come from, most likely from front row, though, for next season. So no crew chief or anything like that, but Matt McCall seems to be the favorite for that job. They've worked really well with Chip Ganassi Racing with Kurt Busch. We'll see what happens with that. I think Kurt Busch would definitely like to have Matt McCall come over there. It seems like they're familiar with each other, but let's see if there's somebody else that could go out there and be a good fit with Kurt Busch as well. All those things are still yet to be announced. It's just the main thing here, Kurt Busch, the 2311 Racing.
Yeah, and it's super, super exciting going into next year. And speaking of the feedback and helping a team develop, it's not just Chip Ganassi Racing. It's not just Stewart Haas Racing. You can go before that. You can look to Furniture Row. You can look to Phoenix Racing back in the day. He's made the playoffs every single season since 2013 with Furniture Row Racing. All seasons with the 41 car at Stewart Haas, all seasons in the number 1 car, Chip Ganassi Racing. That's going to be the expectation going into next season. Brand new car. Everybody's on an equal playing level. 2311 won't be behind the 8 ball. They'll be at the same starting point as everybody else. The expectation will be to find a way into victory lane at some point next season. And at the very least, go out and be in that top 16 in points. Whether that's enough to get you in the playoffs remains to be seen, but that is going to be the expectation level. That's essentially where Chip Ganassi Racing has been this year with Kurt Busch. That's where the expectation is going to be into next year for 2311 and Kurt. And so anytime you have a multi-year contract with somebody that is already past their prime, the age 39 peak season, he's a handful of seasons past that at this point, you kind of are waiting for that drop off. But so far, Kurt has been very, very consistent. He's kept that level. And even if he does fall off in terms of performance, as we've seen with guys like Ryan Newman, there's still a certain amount of value that comes in that veteran driver, because even if they're maybe not performing to that same level as they used to be, they're still providing that level of feedback. So I think this is a great deal for 2311 and Kurt Busch here. Great for Bubba Wallace to have that kind of driver to be able to mentor him into next season and really be that benchmark for him as well. Going to be the same shop, going to be the same guys. Remains to be seen what crew chief and stuff like that is. I'm a little more hesitant to say Matt McCall is going to be the guy. I think it's more likely they have somebody in-house, whether at Toyota or whoever, take that crew chief job, but we'll see what ends up happening there. But excited to see how this goes into next year. The Monster Energy car moving over to 2311. Good to see them maintaining in the sport as well with Kurt here. And a lot of eyes will be on 2311 next year, and even more now with Kurt Busch in the fold.
I think it takes a little bit of pressure off Bubba Wallace too, which would be really, really important. You know,
see, I'd argue the opposite. I think it puts more pressure on him, because the pressure will be on to prove that he should be the guy to go out and compete alongside Kurt.
For me, I'd say that having somebody else to help mentor him will be better for his long-term game in the sport rather than the short term. And the results may not look great on paper next season compared to Kurt Busch. And I think that's really going to be a tough task. I don't know. Obviously this is all just speculation, but if Kurt Busch does outperform Bubba Wallace, then there may be a bit more doubt put into the minds of fans or something like that. But it'd be long-term game here. I think that would do well for Bubba Wallace if he can learn from somebody from Kurt Busch. And he's not just the singular guy over there. The pressure's on him the entire time. There's at least a second car to try and just pass that pressure on to somebody else. So it's kind of an equal playing field in a sense, at least from my perspective. But it definitely, you can go either way with it. I don't think you're wrong either. I think that there's equal amount of pressure on Bubba Wallace next season as they're going into this season, or even more so next season. So there's a lot of different things to take into consideration, but at the end of the day, 2311 Racing has had an outstanding almost year here in terms of announcements of having a guy like Bubba Wallace to come in there, be your main guy. Of course, Michael Jordan being a co-owner of the team doesn't hurt either. And now you've snagged a former Cup Series champion in just going into your second season, which is phenomenal to see. So Trackhouse and 2311 Racing are going head to head right now in terms of these new teams coming at the same time. And that's going to be a fascinating.
I still don't like comparing them, but
it's still fascinating time to be a NASCAR fan in terms of seeing these two teams blossom into something and really have the ambition going into something for 2022.
Yeah, and just on Kurt and Bubba and that dynamic there, I obviously agree with the fact that having him there is going to help Bubba. I don't think it's going to hurt him. But I don't agree whatsoever with the pressure part. I think it definitely ratchets up next year because he's going to, for the first time in his Cup Series career, have a teammate. He's going to have somebody to directly compare his results to. And given all the eyeballs that are on him, all the pressure that is already on him, to have somebody Kurt Busch's quality stepping into that team, and as you would expect, be able to perform right away, the expectation will be that Bubba Wallace is able to hold his own. It's not going to be a rout, and that's going to be the goal for him next year. I do believe Kurt is the better driver and will outperform him next season, but it's about maintaining that gap and being close enough and being able to kind of grow as the season goes along with him rather than kind of being left in the dust. And so the pressure will be on absolutely next season for Bubba here to be able to perform alongside Kurt. But I do think that this will be a strong team relationship here between the two.
Hopefully, I hope that they can get some results next season. And if they get that first win for the team, that's going to be one heck of a celebration. Hopefully Michael Jordan is there to experience that first win if it does happen in 2022. But we can move on probably to the next thing here, Kyle, and that involves the charter system once again. Spire has reportedly purchased a charter from StarCom Racing. And of course, Spire's been in the charter news basically this entire season. They sold two of their
entire last 5 seasons.
Yeah, they've previously this season sold 2 of their 3 charters to Colleague Racing for next season. So they still had that one for the 7 car, but now they're reportedly buying the second one. It's not confirmed by the teams or anything like that, but it's basically confirmed. I just want to preface that so that it's out there. But from Spire's point of view, they're going to have 2 charters now, at least for next season. Currently, we'll see what they do with this newly bought charter from StarCom, and if they decide to lease that to somebody else, that could be coming up. A GMS Racing, we think that the 2311 one is going to come from Front Row. So who's going to be out there maybe looking for a second charter? But if they decide to keep it, well, they have that 77 car that they could decide to run full time or some sort of part-time basis with the charter. So lots of different variables to go into play here. You wouldn't have thought maybe Spire would be in play for a charter for the second charter after selling 2 of them earlier this season. But hey, this is NASCAR silly season in 2021. Anything can happen. So what are your initial thoughts here, Kyle? This is an interesting play by Spire. Leaves a lot to be up in the air, at least for the short-term future here of what's going to happen with this second charter if they decide to keep it or lease it out.
Yeah, so just quickly, if they do keep the charter into next season and run it themselves, they have to run every single race. That's part of the charter agreement. So you can't run a chartered car part-time. So just wanted to clarify that one. But this is a fascinating one to me. It's not often you see a team sell 2 charters in an off season and then buy another one a couple of months later. It's very strange in this regard. So we knew at one point that Spire was looking to have 2 full-time drivers, and it looked like that was going to go away when they ended up selling the 2 charters to Colleague Racing. Is that plan now back buying this charter, or is this them continuing to play the charter game? We've seen them over the last handful of years kind of wheel and deal charters, buying them when they come available, leasing them out year over year, stuff like that. And so like this season, the charter that Trackhouse Racing is using is being leased or being leased from Spire Motorsports. That was why Trackhouse, when Spire sold 2 of their charters, had to go out and buy 2 charters from somebody and ended up just buying out Chip Ganassi's NASCAR stuff because they needed 2 charters. And that was one that they kind of found a way to make available. So do I think that they'll run it? I think it's about 50-50, to be honest. I think they could go out and do kind of similar to what they've done this year, where they have LaJoie in the 1 car and or I guess in their first car, and then in the second car either have a rotation or go out and find another driver. The more likely scenario I see is they kind of snapped up the opportunity to get a StarCom with some of the relationship that they likely have with that fellow backmarker team that also runs same manufacturer, and go out and lease that to somebody else. And the one that I would look to is GMS Racing. You're talking about another Chevy team, a team looking to come into the Cup Series full-time next year if they can get that charter sealed up. Maybe not wanting to commit all the way to go out and purchase one fully themselves, because that might be a little bit too much to go out and do for GMS as it stands. But if Spire has control of it, they can then lease it for the one season, kind of get their feet wet, and then maybe look to buy it full time if they want to into the future, continue leasing, a bunch of different options from there. So I think that's most likely the scenario. I'd be a little bit surprised if we saw Spire run 2 cars next year, just given that they already kind of committed to running 1 car earlier this season when they sold 2 of their 3 charters. So I'm interested to see how this one goes, because this is a weird one. I didn't expect to see StarCom sell out or anything like that. I figured that they would stay, but I think they might see the writing on the wall with a lot of these charters being snapped up by better teams. And the rule that's in place in NASCAR right now is if you finish bottom 3 of the chartered cars for 3 straight seasons, NASCAR has the option to rescind your charter and basically wheel and deal it themselves. So might be seeing the rating on the wall. It wasn't something that they're at risk of this season. The only car that's at risk of that this season is the 51, and it's looking like that won't be a scenario. Remains to be seen. But to me, it's Spire taking advantage of an opportunity, jumping on something quickly, and continuing to play the charter game that kind of got them in the first place when they initially bought the Furniture Road charter.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know who they would be looking at for a second guy if they were to keep it as that second driver. There's a lot of different names out there that could potentially fill that spot. They've lost Justin Haley now to Colleague for next season, so they don't really have that 77 guy that they've relied on over the past couple of seasons at least. But there's some intriguing names that could potentially just want to stick their nose around in the Cup Series, remain here, or come up from the Xfinity Series or something like that could potentially stay in that spot. But lots of different variables to go along with Spire right now. And they're an intriguing team because we initially thought that they would try and go towards being more of a successful Cup Series team, try and be a mainstay. Then you thought with the Colleague news selling them earlier this season that they were maybe taking a step back from their previous stance, but now maybe they're reinvigorated and they feel like they are in a position to compete and try and maintain in that top 30 in points if they can do so with 2 cars next season. It's going to be an incredibly tight midfield battle with these kind of midfield teams adding a second car. We'll talk about another midfield team here in just a second, but Spire's fascinating. They're an intriguing team. You don't really have too many expectations from them, but they have a lot of interesting tidbits about them. Corey LaJoie is no slouch of a driver. He's very consistent. He gets the most out of that equipment for being a back marker team per se. And I'm intrigued to see what happens over the next couple of weeks here, couple of months, no matter how long it takes for them to decide what to do with the second charter, if they decide to keep it or if they decide to lease it out.
Yeah, I do think that they'll go the lease route. I would be a little bit surprised if they kept it themselves, just because selling it the 2 charters earlier this year, there was no guarantee they were getting that other one back. So you would assume that if they are planning to run that second charter themselves, that they're getting back in the game late, wouldn't have been in conversations with drivers because they would have already had Corey LaJoie locked up into next season. So I'd be a little surprised if that's the case, maybe continuing a colleague relationship or something like that, or maybe finding a place for somebody that's currently in the Xfinity Series. But I think it's more likely that we see GMS kind of take that charter and see what they do with that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know. It doesn't look like this junior motorsports team for a Cup team is going to be happening for 2022 at least. Year, no. So that's kind of out the window in terms of getting a charter for something like that. So if you're looking at the Chevrolet camp, most likely with GMS being a Chevy truck team, that makes a logical explanation for making a move like this in terms of getting it and then leasing it out, seeing what GMS can do in the Cup Series for next season, and then go from there if they want to scale back their operations or expand or buy it fully back from Spire. Who knows what's going to happen with that, but that seems like a 50-50 split right now. I'd probably lean towards the leasing side of things as well right now, because we don't know much about this GMS Cup Series team that they announced seems like ages ago.
Well, what we do know is that if they can secure a charter for next year, they're going to run full time. If not, they're going to do the colleague model and go part-time and kind of pick their races. That's what we know. So assuming that they can figure something out with Spire or they can get that charter, that seems like the most likely scenario to me.
Alrighty. We'll move on to the next little bit here, Kyle. JTG Daugherty Racing. It's been kind of out there. They're scaling back to a 1-car operation for 2022, as announced by Brad Daugherty over a Zoom kind of conference call or press conference with the media, going with NBC's kind of coverage into the playoffs. They just had an open media availability, and he was asked about the what's happening with their 2022 plans. They are going to be going back down to a one-car organization, and looks like Ryan Preece is going to be looking for a new ride elsewhere for 2022. It seems like Ricky Stenhouse Jr. will stay as their one driver for next season. That makes a lot of sense. He doesn't really have many options elsewhere in the Cup Series currently, but for Ryan Preece, that's unfortunate for him. But then again, they weren't open charter this season, did not have that second charter for this team. So we'll see if they can actually fill out the remainder of the season. There was talks earlier in the year, maybe they couldn't run the full schedule, but now we're in the final 10 races of the season. Maybe they can do it. But nonetheless, it looks like Ryan Preece's time with JTG is going to be up in at least 10 races or less this season. So makes a lot of sense. They just didn't quite have the performance that they need from the second car, and it's a smart decision going into a next-gen car to focus their efforts entirely onto a one-car organization here with Ricky Stenhouse Jr., try and build something here and go on this level playing field that we've talked about earlier in the episode as well. Everybody's from square one. We'll see who can come out of the gates, but he seemed optimistic in his answer of what they could perform. I'm not sure why he wouldn't be optimistic. They're a team that they could go out there and potentially win a surprise race at a super speedway or something like that if things went their way. But I'm not surprised at all by this move. It makes a lot of sense from an organizational point of view and financial point of view going into this new era of NASCAR. But it's interesting to see where Ryan Preece may end up. Does he go down to the Xfinity Series and try and prove himself once again as a race winner with somebody like the Stewart-Haas Racing organization because of the KHI agency and everything like that, the ties there? Or does he, obviously won a Truck Series race earlier this season with David Gilliland Racing in the 17 at Nashville. So he can win races. He's just not quite in the equipment here that shows it consistently enough where he can go and compete week in and week out. But what are your thoughts here, Kyle, on JTG scaling back their operations to a one-car organization and Ryan Preece being left out in the cold?
Yeah, well, I think this is something that they expected to happen all season long. They ended up not having access to that same charter that they'd been using, the one that they were leasing from Spire. They ended up taking back and ended up leasing it out to Trackhouse going into this season. So the writing was kind of on the wall that they were going to scale back operations in some form, whether they were going to sell the one charter that they had and completely go out of the Cup Series, or whether they were going to keep the one and then just keep the one car into next season. And I think that's probably the right choice. There was no real reason for them to try and either get back in the charter game, given the prices that they've been going for, or try to run an open car next year. It's just not financially, it just doesn't make financial sense for them to try that. And so they can focus all the operations on the one car that they have there, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. He's the better of the two drivers. He's had the more consistent performances. Mm-hmm. He's had the bigger highlights. And they've had some decent cars and decent performances, but they've kind of been lacking speed and lacking consistency in certain areas. And so scaling back will hopefully help with that. For Ryan Preece, it's unfortunate to see him lose out on this ride. Again, he's been a victim of a lot of bad luck, a lot of inconsistency as well, though. But I think in the flashes that he's shown, in some of the underlying metrics as well, he's shown that he is a competent driver. He showed this year that he can still win when he went down with the Fords as well with DGR in the Truck Series. So when he was going cross manufacturer, I think that was another thing that kind of told you how things were going to end up this season. I'm not sold that they're going to run the entire schedule the rest of this year yet. We knew that they would do all the regular season. The playoffs were the ones that were in question. We'll see if they do end up running all of those races. I think it mainly depends on if they have the sponsorship for it. But for Preece, I would expect him to go down to the Xfinity Series level and probably go to Stewart-Haas Racing, just given the Kevin Harvick Incorporated management that he has in terms of his agency. Seems to be a decent relationship there. When he went down to the Truck Series, he did so with the Ford group, with DGR. So everything seems to be pointing that direction, whether that would be replacing Riley Herbst or whether that would be bringing back the 00 entry and having two Stewart-Haas cars into next season. I'm not too sure. That's the direction I think it would go. There's also the possibility of going back to Joe Gibbs Racing with the Xfinity program, something that he did part-time and won a race in a few years back. There's going to be a couple openings at the Xfinity level there. Maybe one, maybe two, depending on what happens. We know that there's one for sure with Harrison Burton. We don't know if the 54 is going to come back full time. But if it does, don't know if that's going to be a rotation car with Kyle Busch not being there, not having Ty Gibbs need to go part-time. So if they do bring that back, that's then a second seat available. What happens with Daniel Hemrick? What happens with Brandon Jones? So there could be anywhere from 1 to like 3 seats available at Joe Gibbs Racing into next season. Could he potentially be an option there? So I do think that he'll go back to the Xfinity Series level or something along those lines and get a solid ride, maybe even the Truck Series, and maybe do something with DGR and be a veteran that can help out some of those young drivers that they have there, depending on what happens with Front Row Motorsports' current programs that they have going on. So not too concerned for Ryan Preece. I think it's going to be better for him to go down back to one of the lower series levels and build his name back up, be a championship contender in one of those series, and then maybe see if he can land another mid-pack ride into the future in the Cup Series. Kind of got that GTG ride off of a part-time schedule, which is something that was very impressive that he was able to do. Didn't necessarily go the way that he wanted it to, and it's unfortunate to see it end this way as an open car, not making the playoffs, kind of being a distant car after a nice start to the season as well. But I think he'll land on his feet here in the coming months as we kind of get into the end of Cup Series silly season, and then we start seeing what's going to happen at the Xfinity Series and Truck Series levels.
Yeah, he's a fascinating one, Ryan Preece. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Matt DiBenedetto, and I think they should have a similar line of thinking in terms of going down to the Xfinity Series and winning.
I compare him more to a Josh Berry in terms of being more of a local track legend. Josh Berry doing so in late models, Ryan Preece doing so in tour modifieds, getting an opportunity part-time in a Xfinity Series level, winning a race, doing well, and then kind of parlaying that into something more. Obviously, Preece doing so at the Cup Series level with a mid-pack team in JTG, Preece doing so in finding and then Barry doing so and finding a full-time ride into next season for Junior Motorsports. But I can see where you're coming from there.
I think in terms of stories to get to where they are, yes, I agree with you. Josh Berry and Ryan Preece are basically identical in a lot of ways, but current situation, guys that need to maybe prove themselves a little bit more. I think Josh Berry has done that so far, so he doesn't need to worry about that. But right now, Matt DiBenedetto and Ryan Preece need to worry about maybe trying to win races and try and get to victory lane and show that they can do it at a lower level and then try and rebuild themselves and go back to the Cup Series level. I think DiBenedetto is probably the slightly better driver of the two, but given the right equipment, given the day, I think they're pretty equal if they have something like that. I'm pretty high on Ryan Preece. I think he's a pretty talented guy. I think Matt DiBenedetto is really talented as well. I just think they just need to have the right circumstances, the right foundation for them to go out there and contend for something like that in the lower series. I would not be surprised if Ryan Preece decides to go to a different manufacturer. It seems like Chevrolet may not be the fit for him.
So I'd be shocked if he stays with a Chevy.
So then if he goes to a Toyota, yes, there's that previous relationship with JGR like you outlined, and then as well as KHI stuff with Stewart-Haas Racing, that would make a lot of sense as well. But those are the two really landing spots you'd look at for Ryan Preece. Matt DiBenedetto is maybe less clear, but we don't have to get into Matt DiBenedetto here today. But for Ryan Preece, I'm a little bit sad for him. You know, I do like him in the Cup Series, just hasn't quite found his consistency that he needs to perform in a midfield team that really needs consistency. Bring the car home in one piece. It's happened less often than you would have liked for somebody like Ryan Preece there. So lots of different things to consider for himself moving forward. I think the Xfinity Series is the best route, but you never know. Maybe the Truck Series is something he looks at and then focuses more on doing maybe a modified schedule in some capacity as well, just kind of splitting between the two starts if he wants to try and just diversify his driving abilities and go around and try and do stuff that he can actually go out there and win consistently. But that's obviously for Ryan Preece to decide, not for us. So do you have any more final thoughts on Ryan Preece here?
Yeah, well, just quickly on DiBenedetto there, I think a lot of people are forgetting that he was a playoff driver last year, and since the crew chief change, he's top 16 in points. So I think a lot of people are forgetting that, and there's a big difference between being a good driver and being a playoff level driver. But for Preece, it's going to be about going back down. He said it kind of after the Nashville win he wants to win races somewhere. And so obviously he's not going to get that opportunity at the Cup Series level. Maybe if Spire keeps their car, maybe he can keep in the Cup Series if he wants to do that and try and build up the program that they have there. That could be a decent landing spot. But I think it's most likely he goes down to Xfinity or Trucks and does so as a veteran that kind of looks to compete for a championship. And I think that's probably the best course of action for him.
Speaking of the Xfinity Series, let's head down there for this next little bit of news, as Noah Gragson will return to Junior Motorsports in 2022 with the help of Bass Pro Shops, Black Rifle Coffee, and True Timber returning as partners for the number 9 car next season. And it's looking more and more likely with each day that Junior Motorsports is going to be a 5-car operation next season full-time, with Sam Mayer, Josh Berry, now Noah Gragson, just waiting on Michael Annett and Justin Allgaier, 2 guys that are there currently, are looking to be re-up for next season. But all signs are pointing towards that. And that would be a big step for Junior Motorsports to go with 5 cars full-time next season. But it would make a lot of sense. They don't really have much room elsewhere to really move these guys. If they were to move on, Michael Annett brings in sponsorship, may not have the best results. Of course, the playoff situation, it is what it is due to him missing a couple of races here, not by his own doing. I credit him for taking his health into consideration here and putting that first. But then for Justin Allgaier, could go out there and win the championship this season, is always a championship contender. So you have a really strong 5-car organization here. Noah Gragson still trying to find that first win this season, has had some bad luck by his own doing, but also just bad luck circumstances. And then you have an up and coming prospect that is going to do very, very well for himself, it seems, in this sport, in Sam Mayer, with Josh Berry, of course, being the clear reason why he's getting that number 8 seat next season. So lots of things to be excited about if you're a Junior Motorsports fan or a Dale Jr. fan or one of these 5 drivers fans for probably next season. So makes a lot of sense that Noah Gragson is staying around in 2022. Didn't really have an option elsewhere to go up to the Cup Series in 2022, that is. So hasn't really shown enough in the Xfinity Series, I would argue, either, especially this season. You would have expected him to really try and take that next step and win races consistently. When you look at the other drivers he's around, he should be up there with the likes of an Austin Cindric or an AJ Allmendinger in that top 4 for sure in the regular season points. Given the previous results of that number 9 car, specifically a basically formidable championship opponent year in and year out, whoever goes into that car hasn't quite been fulfilled by Noah Gragson since he stepped into this Junior Motorsports ride, since moving it from the Truck Series from KBM. So your thoughts here on Noah Gragson, Kyle? Makes a lot of sense, at least from my perspective. I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, I thought that he could have been a candidate to go up to the Cup Series with a mid-pack / back marker team. Thought he could have been a candidate for JTG if they did want to keep that second car, because he does bring a decent bit of sponsorship with the Bass Pro Shops, Black Rifle Coffee stuff that he has on the car, especially this season. But I think it's probably best for him as a driver to stay in the Xfinity Series and try and just push the season aside, kind of regroup into next season. And he can obviously still do that into the playoffs, but thought he could have been a candidate for a GMS Cup Series ride, stay with Chevrolet, do so with them. He was a name that I had seen a couple of times kind of linked with them. So I'm not certain what GMS has up their sleeve now if they do go full-time in the Cup Series. But for Gragson, the best thing for him is just going to be to find that consistency. This year kind of went a little bit haywire, had a great start to the year, should have won Homestead if it wasn't for the chaos that was the David started blown tire. But that's the situation that he found himself in, and he hasn't really been able to find his groove again so far this season. So he's had a couple of good results here and there, hasn't been able to find victory lane. He's in the low single digits in terms of overall season points. Going to be hard pressed in the playoffs given the last lack of playoff points as well. But re-ups has another season at Junior Motorsports where he can go out and in likely a 5-car stable look to be the guy at that team and parlay himself into a Cup Series ride. And so probably best to keep those Junior Motorsports ties as well. We know that at some point they're going to end up in the Cup Series. Probably it's just a matter of when, and maybe keeping those options open into next year isn't the worst thing in the world either. But a couple of good sponsors on board, talented race car driver that just needs to figure things out a little bit. Couple of flashes here and there this season, tough sophomore season here. And so he needs to kind of really start to find his groove into next season if he's going to be a true Cup Series level driver.
Do you think it would be his last chance next season if he doesn't perform?
No, last chance is harsh to say.
Okay, maybe I should reword it, but just like this would be one of his, it would be a really pivotal year for him to make it to the Cup Series. If he doesn't perform, if he has a similar season this year as he does next year, do you think the expectations change around Noah Gragson's potential in the sport?
I think his potential has kind of been known the entire time, to be honest. He wasn't a championship level driver in the Pro Series West, K&N at the time, which is the lesser of the two, East versus West. He was top 5 in or K&N Pro East at the time. Went to the Truck Series, was good with KBM, especially in 2018, where he's a championship contender there. But I don't think he's ever been this caliber of prospect that's a top 5 prospect that looks to be a potential future star or anything like that. He's been good at the lower levels. He's had his flashes. But I think overall, in terms of potential, he's always been kind of a mid-pack kind of guy. And we're kind of seeing that same thing now. I think into next season, if he has another similar year to what he's had this year, and sorry, I misspoke earlier. This is his 3rd Xfinity Series season already. Time is insane. But I think the important thing to note there is that next year will be his 4th Xfinity season. And if it kind of goes the same way that it's kind of gone these last couple of seasons, starting to get into that Brandon Jones territory of some bad luck is involved, but overall you've been there at a good ride for a long enough time, need better results. And things could have gone a lot differently for Gragson last year. You just think about Texas and the chaos that was the end of that race. Wow. Had a great last little stretch there in the playoffs with a lot of top 3 results, but this year hasn't been able to find that same groove. If he can do that in the playoffs, I think a lot of the conversation changes around Gragson. But yeah, next year is going to be a make or break season in terms of what his Cup Series future prospects will be. But I think this year you're already starting to kind of get that feeling that he's probably not going to land that top Cup Series ride at any point. Like he's definitely not any of that replacing Jimmy Johnson and Hendrick Motorsports or anything like some people thought he could have been at one point. But yeah, he's it's going to be I won't go a last chance or anything like that into the next season, but it'll absolutely be a make it or break it season.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It's not blossomed into something that I thought that Noah Gragson would have potentially done by now. I thought he would have been, in the Final 4. It seems if he makes it this season, then maybe my perceptions will change a little bit, but I think that's a little bit far-fetched for him to go that deep in the playoffs this season. But next season, I need to see the consistency and need to see him win some races. Track's different than a Homestead or something like that. If he can diversify his skill set, because he seems like to be more of a one-dimensional kind of driver rather than not with running the high line and using more of the throttle. He's got really good skill set in that area. But I think road course racing, he's kind of meh in terms of what you look at. When you look at someone like Justin Allgaier or even, Austin Cindric is somebody you can't really compare because he's one of the best in the series. But I just think that there's a lot of room for improvement for Noah Gragson. If he really wants to make that next step to the Cup Series for 2023, he's going to have a really big 2022 season. If 2021 does not finish the way that it's kind of currently, if it does finish the way it's currently looking like it will for the number 9 car. But fascinating to see. This may be one of his final chances in a junior motorsports car for next season. If he can not get the results in 2022, let's hope he does, so that for his own sake, for his own career, that this is a good move for him moving forward. And he finds that Cup Series ride, because that's obviously what we want at the end of the day for a lot of these guys, that they do end up to the Cup Series. It's just that his options may be limited by the time he may be ready to get there, or the option may not be what he initially hoped it would when he started this journey with KBM and even back to the K&N days and stuff like that. So lots of different things to keep your eye on for Noah Gragson and that junior motorsports stable, as well as the season kind of winds down here. Who's going to end up with them? 5-car organization seems likely. We'll see if that does actually come to fruition probably soon. I imagine they won't leave it too long before they announce if they are going to be going with 5 full-time cars. But any final thoughts on Noah Gragson before we move on to the next thing?
No, not much.
Okay, sounds good. We'll stay in the Xfinity Series here. Tommy Joe Martins has partnered with Cesar Bacarella to form Alpha Prime Racing to compete in the Xfinity Series next season. Tommy Joe Martins, a fan favorite. Everybody loves the guy. He's a mid-pack guy that consistently gets results. I'm surprised you aren't wearing the T-shirt here today, Kyle, but...
I'm wearing the Canada Soccer T-shirt because World Cup qualifying starts tonight, good sir.
I couldn't tell, but that is actually a better wardrobe choice for today. But Tommy Joe Martin's a fan favorite, like I said, and Cesar Bacarella, two guys that are kind of in that midfield battle in the Xfinity Series that sometimes get these surprise results, and sometimes they end up on the flatbed. That is not quite of their own doing. They have some bad luck, but this is an interesting partnership between the two guys here. Martins is going to run a part-time schedule next season along with Bacarella. Martins is about 10 to 15 races, it seems. So it's going to be the number 44 car as well. So Tommy Joe Martin's number stays with him for next season. It makes a lot of sense in terms of budgetary wise and financial wise that these guys are going to partnership together, because it is a lot for a single car team, for a mid-pack team that is usually family run or some sort of family roots to continue on in their Xfinity Series journey. That's kind of what the Martins family is doing currently in 2021. Makes a lot of sense to partner here with Cesar Bacarella for next season. So what are your thoughts here on this newfound Xfinity Series team here, Kyle? Seems like a fun little duo to really try and build something here for the future.
Yeah, I think saying that it's a new team is a bit of a stretch, because it's essentially just Martins Motorsports with a new name and a new partner involved. But I'm excited to see what they can do into next season. It's going to be unfortunate to not see Tommy Joe Martins running the full schedule, but this is something that he's been cognizant of and has kind of talked about a lot this season, that it's just not financially stable for them to continue him running full-time in that series. And so hope that they can finish off this season well as we get into kind of the later part of the regular season and then into the playoffs. Hope that they can get a couple more really strong results as Tommy Joe Martins finishes up his full-time career in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but nice that he'll be back for at least a couple of races next season. The big thing, of course, is the partnership with Cesar Bacarella, who's had a couple of starts here and there with DGM Racing. Usually at the super speedway. So I'm interested to see what races he ends up doing next season. But the big thing for a lot of people, of course, is the involvement of Rajah Caruth in this announcement, and seeming to be this up and coming Xfinity Series team with somebody that's got a lot of savvy in the Xfinity Series, and Tommy Joe Martins having another partner there, and Bacarella, who brings some dollars to the table as well, and giving somebody like Caruth an opportunity. This is a guy that has been a fan favorite for quite a while in the NASCAR community. Somebody that is part of the Drive for Diversity program. And so this is somebody that I think a lot of people are really excited to see get this opportunity for, if it's, we assume that it'll be about the level of what Martins Motorsports currently is. So something that's one of the better mid-pack cars in the Xfinity Series field. He's had some really good results so far this season in the ARCA East season, a couple of starts there or full-time there. And then obviously the crossover with the full-time ARCA starts there. So a nice season with Rev Racing there in ARCA. He'll still be running that program in addition to the part-time Xfinity program. So really excited for this opportunity for Caruth, and nice to see Martins kind of figure out what their long-term plan is going to be in the Xfinity Series, and nice to see them be able to stay full-time as a team, just maybe not so as much with Tommy Joe as the driver.
Yeah, definitely. I hope that they can get some consistent top 15 results, if that is kind of within the range of realm of possibility.
That's the goal. Just given what they've been at already, that's basically what a good day is for them at this point, which is remarkable to say because it wasn't long ago that they were a part-time team.
Yeah.
So they've clearly become kind of one of those better of the mid-pack Xfinity Series teams, consistently in that top 20 conversation in points, consistently in that top 20 conversation in terms of finishes, a good day being one of those top 15 runs. So excited to see what they can do as a kind of a partnership into next season, hopefully continuing to improve and give people like Rajah Caruth these opportunities.
Definitely. It's good to see that these guys that are young and inexperienced, but still have a lot of potential, are getting these opportunities to prove themselves in good equipment, not too many expectations, at least, to really get your feet wet, but then they can try and build something off here and then look at something maybe a bit bigger in the future. So really happy to see that this partnership is giving it an opportunity to somebody like Caruth, and hopefully that they have a good inaugural season in their partnership together in 2022. We didn't really talk about it before we started recording here, Kyle, but that does it for the NASCAR news and notes. But do you want to talk a little bit about Romain Grosjean with the news that came out with him and going over to IndyCar's newly the former and Ryan Hunter race car in the 28 for next season and joining Andretti Autosport?
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. The fact that Romain Grosjean in one season showed as much as he has with Dale Coyne Racing to get the call up to Andretti Autosport, again, after one season, is insane. We've seen former F1 guys come over to IndyCar and not be able to do so right out of the gate. You look at Max Chilton, who's had some good results with Carlin, but overall hasn't been that same level. Marcus Ericsson took a couple of seasons to really become the championship contender that he's become this season. And Grosjean has looked like a championship contender right out of the gate. He's going to Andretti Autosport, and that 28 entry, he's going to be alongside another former F1 guy in Alexander Rossi and a potential future F1 guy in Colton Herta, and be a formidable trio there. Probably Devlin DeFrancesco in the 29 into next season, but in the 28 entry, he's going to be a championship contender. He's going to have that extra little bit, just in terms of everywhere, but especially on the road courses. He's going to be a win threat week in, week out on those road courses. And if his debut at Gateway showed us anything, he's quickly going to become a threat on the ovals as well. So the expectations are going to be huge for him into next season, and rightfully so, given what we've seen from him this season. Super excited for that move. And I expect him to be in that top 5, top 6 in the championship and contending all season long.
I'm pumped for him, man. I could not be more excited for Romain Grosjean, a fan favorite. And after everything that happened to him last season in Bahrain, you can't help but love the guy. I mean, what he's been through over the past 12 months, even less so than that, has been spectacular. And what he's been able to accomplish so far this season for a rookie to be up there with the likes of, looking at that Rookie of the Year battle. It's closer than I would have actually thought it would be, looking at like a Scott McLaughlin and Romain Grosjean, with Grosjean not doing the ovals as much, saying that there's not many ovals that they've done so far this season.
It's funny to say, because we think going into the year, he's not doing the ovals. This will be a route. He ends up doing Gateway. So realistically, he's only missed 3 races.
Exactly. But he's outperformed that equipment by far, and he's done spectacular things so far in his rookie season. I say that rookie season, like you said, but I am super pumped to see what he can do with Andretti Autosport equipment next season. He's going to have such a great resources surrounding him with teammates and personnel to really try and boost his overall performance. And in saying that, his overall performance has been spectacular so far this season. So the sky's the limit here for Romain Grosjean, really, for next season. And hopefully that he can fulfill the expectations that we kind of have initially set here and look towards being in that championship fight season long, because I would really love to see that for him, seeing a Formula One guy come over to IndyCar and really try and blossom into something that can work in North America, and vice versa. If we could get some more IndyCar guys to potentially go over there overseas to F1, that would be awesome to see as well.
That's a little more far-fetched, but we'll see. We'll see.
But that just spitballing, it's just like stuff like that. It's what motorsports fans are really looking forward to. And when you see the crossover between North America to worldwide here with Formula One, is great to see that people are drivers have the capability to adjust so quickly and perform at such a high level, and equipment that we really didn't necessarily think would be in this kind of race winning category, as we've seen a couple of times this year, specifically at the Indy road course, where he has taken very much a liking to in the 3 races so far this season. So just wanted to note that, because it did come out over the past couple of days. Really excited to see Romain Grosjean full-time next season. It's going to be great to see that he's going to be doing that Indy 500 appearance for him next season as well. That would be fascinating to see what he's able to do in that spectacular and historic race. So it couldn't be more pumped for Romain Grosjean, and for Andretti Autosport. This is a huge reset. This is something that they've been trying to do for a couple of seasons, it seems, where they're trying to flush out the older blood and trying to bring in some new life and some new blood into that team. And when you look at the performances so far this season, you could argue that they definitely do need that. Rossi has had some bad luck, of course, this season, but not quite the consistency that they would have really wanted to this season specifically. So wanted to touch on that. Romain Grosjean deserves any sort of chance that we can to talk about him on this show.
Yeah. And just finally on it, it's not like the Dale Coyne car sucks.
No, I don't want to make that. Yeah.
No. I know. I'm saying in general, they won back-to-back St. Pete Grand Prix with Sebastian Bourdais a couple of years ago. So this is a car that has potential. The impressive part is that he's been able to do this as a rookie in his first season with this car. And that's the impressive part. It's the fact that he's been able to transition so quickly and come to grasp so quickly with this style of racing and with this car. And so going into next year with 1 season of road racing under his belt, 1 oval race under his belt, I'm excited to see what that combination with Andretti Autosport can do into next season. And if anything, I don't really see the IndyCar to F1 crossover being a realistic thing, just given the pathway and how difficult it is to accrue super license points in IndyCar. You basically have to be a championship contender in the top 5 at least for like 3 consecutive seasons to even qualify for a super license. So I think that's a little bit more far-fetched. The opportunity that I see Grosjean more opening up in his performances this season is what we've seen with Christian Lundgaard and now with Callum Ilott, is giving an opportunity and a place for these young drivers that maybe don't have a spot in Formula One to come overseas, do 1 or 2 of these starts, or maybe even a full-time program in some of these cases into the future, and really showcase what these guys have against a very talented field, and do so in difficult cars to drive, do so in a foreign opportunity, and really showcase their talents when they may not be able to get those opportunities back in Europe. So I think that's more the pipeline that we'll be seeing, rather than IndyCar drivers going to Formula One or something along those lines. But there's going to be a lot more different things opening up over the next couple of seasons. When you look at the hypercar class opening up and you look at Chip Ganassi starting things in the LMDH program, you look at Audi starting things in the LMDH program, you look at Porsche starting things, you look at Peugeot, you look at Ferrari, there's going to be a lot more of those high quality seats. And we kind of see that already with the expected moves that we're going to see in Formula One with Antonio Giovinazzi going to the Ferrari hypercar program and stuff like that. There's going to be a lot of those seats opening up, and there's going to be a lot of different opportunities for drivers to do a lot of different things. And one of those things that we're already starting to see is some of those young drivers trying out IndyCar. And I think a lot of that is because of what Romain Grosjean's been able to do in a mid-pack car this season.
Yeah, he could be the kind of like the first guy to really start something like that, which would be really, really exciting to see. So just wanted to note that really well deserved for Romain Grosjean so far, what he's done in 2021. Let's see what he can do with Andretti Autosport in that number 28 in 2022. But that'll do it for the news and notes on today's episode. It is fantasy time once again, and we have the playoff usages reset, 5 usages for all drivers. Yeah. I can't even say I've been waiting for that, but I'm glad to get back on 11
you basically
playing
saved
field.
Enough usages to use them still throughout the playoffs.
Yeah. So I'm glad to get some, I'm glad that I'm going to be able to reset here and really go on 11 level playing field. Cause last week at Daytona, I whooped your butt. I should have whooped your butt.
Did you?
Plus 30 points by the end of the race. I wouldn't
necessarily call that a whooping, but okay.
I think at Daytona I could classify that as that, but of course,
whatever helps you sleep at night.
But I did lose last week in fantasy due to Chris Buescher.
Oh, that's strange.
Getting disqualified. Of course, the 2 guys that have been disqualified this season I've had in my lineups, and those are the differences I've had in my lineups compared to Mr. Cushman. And I have lost both of those weeks after I thought I had won both of those weeks when the checker flag initially dropped. So it's been a tough go for me on bad luck this season. And that was just another one to round out the regular season.
But that's a decent rule to go by.
Don't do this. Really. I'm serious.
I would also call a whooping winning 12 straight weeks. That's what I would classify.
Okay. We're not doing this. We're not. I can't.
Playoffs, baby.
I'll sign off. But yes, 5 usages for us, for all drivers here moving forward, and level playing field. Darlington represents the longest really race of the season in terms of time. And this is a track that really drags on. It's a race that has a lot of history to it, but at the same time, there's a lot of expectations that come along with this as the first race of the playoffs here. You want to try and win this first race so you don't have to worry about the next 2 being short tracks, Richmond and Bristol. So lots of different guys that could go out there and win this weekend, given previous performances. But when you look at this season, there's a couple of names that really stand out that could go out there and grab the checkered flag and punch their ticket to that round of 12. So let's not waste any time here, Kyle. 5 usages apiece for all the drivers. Like I've said, you kick us off with the first pick for Darlington, the second race at Darlington this season.
Yes. And just before, this is, of course, the second time this year that we're going to Darlington, something a little bit different. Obviously not from last year because we went there like 20 times last year, but from years that we normally had, one Darlington race was usually what we had, and either right at the end of the regular season or right at the beginning of the playoffs. And so this is a little bit different in this circumstance. You've got a different package in terms of the 750 package, which we had earlier this season, but you've also got a second Darlington date. So you've got data to pull from. So a lot of different variables versus some other years that we've had Darlington. Of course, being the second Darlington date, we did have a fantasy battle earlier there this season, which I did win 229 to 183. So feeling good going into this one. Leading things off for my lineup will, of course, be Martin Truex Jr. The guy dominated here earlier this season. It was in the middle of his stretch where he was just clicking off win after win at these 750 playoff tracks. And well, what are we at? 750 playoff tracks, especially in this first round. So Martin Truex Jr., absolutely one of the guys I'm looking to. A perfect 60 points earlier this season. I don't know if he'll be as dominant. It remains to be seen if they can find that form again, because they have kind of faltered a little bit over the rest of that regular season. But I have a lot of faith in kind of the greater, you looking at Joe Gibbs Racing and Penske guys to bring their game back up as we enter the playoffs here. We saw Hendrick kind of take over in the regular season. I expect to be much closer in these playoffs, and that begins with Martin Truex Jr. here at Darlington, dominant earlier this season. I don't see why he won't be right up at the front again this time around.
He kind of reminds me a little bit of last season's Alex Bowman, where he started the season out so strong, maybe not the wins category, but then faltered in the summer months where it just wasn't quite as strong as what you would have expected. And that led to us, using usages when we weren't essentially comfortable with Martin Truex Jr. throughout that summer stretch there, where the consistency wasn't there. The speed wasn't quite where we wanted it to be. So we wish we'd have utilized him a little earlier on in the season on the tracks that he was performing exceptionally well. And this is definitely one of them. Darlington, a perfect 60-point day. 248 laps led out of the 293. This is a must play for me this weekend. Martin Truex Jr. is also in my lineup. Over the past 6 races here at Darlington, 1 victory, 1 top 5. So that was just earlier this season, but a whopping 490 laps led. He starts 10th on Sunday, going into a Sunday night race as well with this one. Going to be a long one, but it's going to be a fun one because Martin Truex Jr. is going to put on a show. This is a long race. Track position is a little bit important, but when it comes down to 500 miles around Darlington, I think track position, you should be able to get up to the front if you have a fast enough car eventually. Saying that, though, it's going to be difficult to pass at times, especially with that new grip strip added in turn 2 with the repavement. Lots of drivers have expressed their concern or their uncertainty surrounding that area on how much of that will impact the racing. Will it become a passing zone, or will it become a one groove racetrack out of turn 2, more so than what it already was? It was difficult to pass off a turn 2. But now you're going to probably want to be in that new slick pavement that they had to repave that area of the track in order to keep that momentum. But then you're going to be entering turn 3 probably a little bit faster than you usually do as well. So lots of different variables here. This is kind of a semi-new Darlington coming into this one. In some cases, when you look at it, lots of unknowns, but looking forward to seeing how the drivers cope with that. And I'm sure they'll be tuning in to the Xfinity Series race and the Truck Series races before their Cup one. But Martin Truex Jr. is in my lineup. Second, there's a lot of different names you could go with this one, but for myself, I'm looking at Denny Hamlin here. Average finish over the last 6 races, 10.5, 1 victory, 3 top 5s, only 47 laps led. He does start second behind Ryan Blaney on Sunday evening. So there is lots of potential here for Denny Hamlin to go out there and get really good stage points in that first stage. He's one of the best here at Darlington. Hasn't quite been as fantastic as of late in terms of that race winning ability, but his 750 horsepower package speed this season has been phenomenal. Hasn't found that victory lane yet so far in 2021. Maybe this is the weekend he does find that out, and he is running the Xfinity Series race on Saturday as well to get him some extra practice laps. He's going to be the most prepared basically out of anybody in the playoffs, apart from Tyler Reddick, who's also running the Xfinity Series race, to know what that grip strip in turn 2 could potentially look like on Sunday. So Denny Hamlin, 100% in my lineup, given their speed on 750 tracks and Darlington being one of his better tracks on the Cup Series calendar.
Yep, Denny Hamlin, absolutely in my lineup as well. Has the fastest median lap time on the 750 package, which is what we're using this weekend. Finished 5th here earlier this season. And as you mentioned, has very, very consistent results at Darlington. And this is a very difficult track for a lot of drivers to find that consistency at. And so for Denny Hamlin, hasn't got necessarily the wins as much recently. Of course, won one of those Darlington races last year, but in a bit of different circumstances. 750 package. They've got a fast car on that package. Good track for Hamlin. He's running the Xfinity Series race, so he will have a bit of that extra lap time as well, even though it will be a very different track when you look at the daytime race for Xfinity versus the late afternoon into evening race for the Cup Series. Going to be some different tire management in that regard, but still quite like him this weekend. So Denny Hamlin, absolutely in my lineup as well. Number 3 for me, going back to one of the big dogs, and that is Kyle Larson. Finished second here earlier this season, was the only guy within the vicinity of Martin Truex Jr. come the end of that race. They have a solid 750 package, 5th in terms of median lap time with this 750 package. But for me, it's the fact that it's Darlington and Kyle Larson, and this is a driver's racetrack. And while Kyle Larson is one hell of a driver, over the last 6 races dating back to 2018, missed all 3 last season, so it's only the 3-race sample, but 48 points earlier this season in 2019, 49 points with Chip Ganassi Racing, and then 54 points in 2018. Kyle Larson is going to be one of the true contenders this weekend, so he is absolutely in my lineup to kick things off here in the playoffs.
He's in it for me too. It's a no-brainer. When you look at the tracks over the course of the playoffs, you could probably pencil in Kyle Larson in almost all of them if you wanted to, but Darlington really stands out as a must play. Over the last 3 races, an average finish of 2.33, 3 top 5s, 328 laps led. He starts 6th on Sunday evening. I just like everything that the 5 cars got going on. He was close to Martin Truex Jr. in the spring. It's going to be a toss-up between those 2 and maybe a couple of other guys that could potentially go up there. But Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Larson, even maybe Denny Hamlin, given his 750 speed, those are 3 guys that are absolutely standout plays here this weekend. So no-brainer to put Kyle Larson in this weekend at Darlington. For my 4th guy, this is where it gets, you can go a lot of different ways, I think, from here on out. There's a lot of different names that you could put into a bag, and hopefully some of them stick and get you some points. And one guy that when I look at their 750 speed this season that really stands out, it's Kevin Harvick. Over the past 6 races, he's got an average finish of 3.17, 2 victories, the defending race winner here in this race specifically last season as well. But of course, he was running 3rd there late before the Truex and Elliott incident going into turn 1. So was kind of fluked into that one essentially, but was still in the right place at the right time. He starts 9th. He's got 211 laps led over the past 6 races here as well. And most importantly, he finished 6th here in the spring, so had good speed. 750 results have been very consistent for them. I like a good points day for Kevin Harvick. Hopefully he can get that done to kick off his playoffs, and he's going to need it because he is coming in as that 16th seed. So needs as many points, playoff points, stage points, whatever you want to categorize it at. He needs as many of those as possible before he hopes to make the round of 12. So Kevin Harvick is in my lineup as my number 4 guy.
Yep. Harvick absolutely in my lineup as well. In fact, I'm expecting him to be a top 5 guy this weekend. The Stewart-Haas speed has been on the 750 track so far this season, ranked 6th in 750 median lap time. It finished 6th here earlier this season. So right on the nose in terms of the package there. Looked very good at New Hampshire, which is kind of what you would pull from in terms of a 750 package going into these playoffs. The last time that the Cup Series guys have to test out that package in the regular season going into this one. Fully expect Stewart-Haas to be a contending team at these kind of next 3 tracks with the 750 package, and that begins with Kevin Harvick. He needs to get those points as the number 16 seed going into these playoffs without those stage wins, without the positional gain of being one of those really solid guys well inside the top 10 in points. Doesn't get anything like that, like Denny Hamlin does, being so high up in points. So for Harvick, points are going to be the name of the game. Need to go out there, get those stage points, need to go out there, get that finish. And I fully expect Kevin Harvick to be in that conversation. Of course, last year was with a different package, but you look over these last 6 races and kind of the recent sample, all of those very strong top 10 performances. And so when I look at how good the Stewart-Haas speed has been on 750 tracks, especially as the season's progressed, really like Kevin Harvick's prospects this weekend. So I've got him in my lineup here as well. To my number 5 guy, it's a guy that I kind of took a swing on earlier this season, even though the speed numbers didn't really suggest it, and it worked out well for myself. I'm going to make that same bet again, and that's Kyle Busch for this one. The results have been very inconsistent on the 750 track so far this season, just the 3 top 10s at Darlington, Richmond, and Martinsville. But Darlington was the best points day of all of those. Drivers racetrack, long race. They still have good 750 speed. It's not amazing by any means. It ranks 8th in terms of median lap time, but I like Kyle Busch prospects here at Darlington. I like him starting off these playoffs. And so worked well for me earlier this season. He got a 3rd place finish. So I'll take the swing on Kyle Busch here again as my number 5 entry.
Man, you're going hardball. Oh my God. I'll think about Kyle Busch over my next pick. I'm not 100% sure.
Well, you've got back-to-back here to round out your lineup, so you better make that decision quickly here.
I know. But one guy I'm for sure having in my lineup this weekend is Chase Elliott. Over the last 6 races here, average finish is not fantastic. 15.58, 2 top 5s, 151 laps led. He starts 4th. He finished 7th here in the spring, but he was in contention here last season for that victory in the closing stages of the race. This is a track where he broke through in his Xfinity Series career as well. So I think all signs point to it when I look at the tracks coming up as well over the playoffs. This is a track that really stands out to me as one where I can play Chase Elliott. There's a couple of ones where I'm not 100% sure. And Charlotte Roval, 100%. We're all going to play him there. That's one that we have penciled in. 550 speed, I think there's maybe some better options at some of them. So when I look at a 750 track, I think that this is probably one of his better ones if he's going to get a result here this weekend. It may not be the best points day. I think high 30s, maybe even low 40s is within range for Chase Elliott if things go his way. Starting 4th, could get some good track position, get some good stage points as well. So I have to go with Chase Elliott. I feel like here for this one for my 5th entry. 6th. There's some good names here. You could go absolutely all-star lineup here I could put Kyle Busch in here, but there's a couple of other guys that I look at as well as potential options. And man, there's some good names. I really got to be honest. We'll get into honorable mentions in a second, but damn, this is tough. This is extremely tough.
There's a lot of really interesting value plays.
Yeah. Damn. I thought you would have maybe came up with something where we'd be a bit different, but no, you haven't. So
how do you know I'm not saving that for my 6th pick here?
I know. But I mean, if I go Kyle Busch here, that means you can't take Chase Elliott. So,
but then you're also using a Kyle Busch usage early.
Yeah, I am indeed.
There's a couple of very interesting Kyle Busch races the rest of this round as well.
Don't get me started on that. Okay, I'm gonna go with I'll go with Joey Logano.
Ooh, okay.
His 750 speed this season has been very encouraging, and when I look at that specifically, may not have the best spring result here. That may be a bit of a concern. But his 750 horsepower package speed has been phenomenal. They've really put an emphasis on that. There's a whole bunch of different guys that could go with this one. But when I look at the tracks coming up and when I look at the playoffs, Joey Logano only has a couple of tracks. Well, actually, I didn't have him penciled in for Darlington when I did my notes. What am I doing? Maybe I'll switch it.
Come on, you locked it in.
No, I didn't lock it in.
That's a bit of a questionable. Are you really?
Yeah, I'm switching it. I'm switching it. I'm switching it. I don't know
how I feel about that, but okay.
I don't care. I'm going to go with William Byron as my last pick.
Okay.
Finished 5th, finished in the top 5 here in the spring. And when I look at the tracks, I feel like I could use Joey Logano elsewhere on the 750 tracks rather than Darlington, given the spring results. I'll go with William Byron here as my last entry. I want to save Kyle Busch for a couple of other races. I think this is a track where I could use a William Byron one instead. And I'm going to have to garage one of these guys. So hopefully maybe a William Byron usage doesn't come back to haunt me here and I could use him a little bit later on. But if he does get up into that top 5 conversation in my lineup, then I feel comfortable enough where I can use William Byron here as my last usage.
Questionable move aside, that's a whole nother thing. I am glad you didn't take Kyle Busch because that leaves me the opportunity to take Chase Elliott, and that's exactly what I'm doing for this last pick here. Of course, the Chase Elliott, Martin Truex Jr. combination should have won me the opening race of the playoffs last year till they both decided to wreck going into those last handful of laps and finish at the latter part of the teens. So that was really fun. I really enjoyed that one.
I don't feel bad for you.
I'm going back to it. Because I really like the prospects there. I like Chase Elliott at Darlington with the 750 package, finished 7th there earlier this season. I would expect them to be a little bit more competitive this time out. The overall numbers are dragged down a little bit because of that finish in the 3rd Darlington race last season. And of course the second one as well, where he got wrecked out. But I think overall the numbers for Chase Elliott are promising when he's been able to finish the races. He had 2 of the 3 races end in wrecks essentially last year.
Yeah.
If he keeps the car clean, finishes the race well, I expect him to be a very strong fantasy play. So he is my number 6 entry in the lineup, basically guaranteeing me 5 really strong guys that I can pick from and then save another usage for future playoff usage from there.
Yeah. 5 of the 6, the same for us here, or no. Yes. Yep. Yes. 5 of the 6. It's William Byron versus Kyle Busch. So that's what it comes down to for the driver lineups, but the bonus picks is probably where this week could ultimately be decided at the end of the
usual.
Yes. But honorable mentions, Kyle Busch. You have him in your lineup for obvious reasons. He's got great numbers here. I just like some other tracks a little bit more. If his 550 speed wasn't as good as it was, then I would definitely look at this place as a racetrack I'd want to pencil him in. But I think all 3 mile-and-a-half tracks, 550 ones, that is, I feel really solid about Kyle Busch. And then the next 2, specifically Richmond and Bristol, you look at. But for myself, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen our playoff predictions, I have Kyle Busch winning the championship. So if he does make it to Phoenix, I do have that usage and maybe get a 40-point day out of him there. Lots of different options for me for that number 18 car. For Tyler Reddick, I have him in here as an honorable mention as well. If you didn't go so heavy hitter, I was looking at him as a value play, but I just can't quite have him competing against some of these big guys. But Tyler Reddick, if you want to save some of these bigger guys just for a little bit more of a mile-and-a-half track, if you feel more comfortable with them a little bit later on, then go for it. Tyler Reddick, I think, would be an excellent addition to your lineup in terms of consistency. This is a track where he earned some good stage points earlier on this season as well. Didn't quite get the finish you'd want, finishing 12th, but he's still in that conversation here at Darlington. So he could be an underrated play here to get some back half of the top 10 stage points and maybe get a top 10 result when it's all said and done on Sunday night. Joey Logano, he does make an honorable mention here. I was obviously close to putting him in my lineup, but 750 horsepower package speed has been their bread and butter this season. And this is a track that's been pretty decent for Logano in his career as well. Doesn't quite have the race victory, but consistency wise, he's very much in the conversation. It seems more often than not. Finished 3rd here in this fall race last year. So look to him to have a pretty solid day. I just like William Byron, maybe just that tad bit more when I looked at my numbers a little bit more closely.
I hope Logano gets a 60-point day.
Okay. If I lose that way, it is what it is. It's my own doing, but I'm happy with my decision.
Psycho move.
Kurt Busch is another one here that I'm going to put into honorable mentions just because of his recent success here at this track. It's not that bad of numbers for the one car. And if he needs to start off his playoffs right, he's got an average finish over the last 6 races of 12.33. Had an incident in the spring as well that really didn't give you a clear representation of maybe what that one car is capable of. Saying that though, his 750 results this season have been pretty poor. So he's more of a fringe guy.
1 top 10. On the 750 tracks.
But you never know. If the track position works out for the one car, he could maybe squeak his way in there for a decent points day. I don't either, but I didn't feel like he was bad enough.
Why an honorable mention if you don't love it?
No, but I just think if you don't want to use some of these big guys that we went for, I think he's a name that you could potentially consider for this. And I didn't feel confident enough for me to say he's a stay away from this week. And you could go out there and maybe get.
Well, it doesn't need to be either or. There is a middle ground.
I don't think so. Not for the playoff guys, really. I think that there's no real middle ground. Either you like them or you don't really.
We're going 16 deep.
No, I didn't name all the playoff drivers, but for Christopher Bell, I think he does make it into this category here as well. This is a track where Adam Stevens has brought a good setup for the 20 car in the past. The 20 car specifically with Eric Jones behind the wheel has been fantastic as an entry here. One of the best average finishes amongst anybody in the field currently. But Christopher Bell's 750 tracks have been more of their forte in 2021. So I like them as a potential value pick here, maybe this weekend. He's a guy you may not get up to 5 usages over the course of these 10 races. So if you want to spend one early, you could do so maybe here at Darlington. And the last one here for honorable mention, I just wanted to toss him in here. You won't use him in your lineup probably this weekend, but it's Eric Jones. I just wanted to give him a special shout out because he has some really, really good numbers. Finished 18th here in the spring, so that's not a bad result either for Richard Petty Motorsports Equipment. Was, I think, running up a little bit towards the top 10 at one point in time, fell back a little bit later on into the race. But Eric Jones, I think, deserves just to be an honorable mention here for Darlington and one of his best, if not his best, Cup Series track by far. So wanted to toss him in there. But for the stay away froms, There's three guys I have here. Ryan Blaney, self-explanatory. This is not one of his best tracks, despite him finishing inside the top 10 in the spring. There's way better options out there than him this weekend, despite him starting on pole. So he could get some stage points, not saying that he couldn't, but there's some guys behind him that are going to be hungry hounds.
It's not worth the risk. There's better places to use him.
He's got a lot of good other tracks coming up over the course of 10 races where you'd really want to use him rather than Darlington. Alex Bowman, I think that there's just some better options elsewhere here at Darlington. Doesn't have a great average finish here over the past 6 races either. Is around the Chase Elliott number, but Chase Elliott has had more incidents than Alex Bowman to really set back his average finish more so than that 48 car. Could potentially go out there and get a top 10, not saying that he can't, but there's some other guys out there that specifically in our lineups that are better options, at least in my opinion here for Bowman. And then last but not least, it's a guy that has really good numbers here at Darlington, but is going in the wrong direction in terms of momentum. It's Brad Keselowski. I think that this could be a surprise weekend. 750 tracks have been a little bit better for them, but they've been hit or miss depending on the track type. A more of a flat track like a Richmond or a New Hampshire, or maybe even a Phoenix is more liking to the 2 car than a track like Darlington. Completely missed the setup here in the spring. I had him in my lineup. He was just a complete no-show, multiple laps down, had a couple of issues as well, but there was nowhere near the speed that I thought the 2 car would bring to a track like Darlington, where he's a former race winner as well. So for all those reasons, I've got those 3 as to stay away from. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What are your thoughts on what I've got?
Bowman's a fascinating one to me because he's very much a boomer bust kind of guy. Like we saw him last year lead quite a few laps at one point at Darlington, finish second. But other than that, it's been a lot of kind of down. He did have a 6th place finish also last season at Darlington, but in general, previous to 2020, no real good results whatsoever to speak from. Earlier this season wasn't all that good. The 750 speed isn't amazing either, just 11th overall. So he's a guy that I'm interested to see where he kind of goes, because of course, with the playoff kind of resurgence that he had last year, it started with that solid run, finishing 6th at Darlington last year. So if he can kind of rekindle that a little bit, I'd look to him as potentially an option. He was in consideration for myself if I wanted to save a usage from somebody else. But I'd rather go heavy early on and need to save stuff or use value guys later on than use value guys early on and then not end up using heavy hitters, essentially. The other guy I really like as a potential other guy that I wouldn't necessarily have as using all 5 usages is Christopher Bell there. Top 10 in terms of 750 median lap time. That's been their strength all season long. I'm expecting JGR to be very strong this weekend. Had a very strong run, of course, at New Hampshire, finishing 2nd there. Not a great run at Darlington earlier this season, finished outside the top 10. But if they're going to make it through this first round, they need to get some good results earlier on. I expect JGR to be strong out of the gate here in the playoffs. And so I will group Christopher Bell into that group as well. So those are 2 that I definitely look to as some value guys with some potential there. Tyler Reddick in that conversation as well, a little bit slower on the 750 speed, but can wheel a race car, to say the least. And so he's in that conversation as well. But I'm fascinated to see where he ends up playing out, because we saw Austin Dillon, of course, last year being the lone RCR guy in the playoffs, look very good, except that was with the 550 package. So I'm interested to see where a couple of those guys end up finishing in this race in terms of fantasy usages as well.
Should be a fascinating weekend for guys that could surprise us, or some of the favorites really go all in and get a massive point staying.
Just to that point, finally, talking about last year's Darlington playoff race with the 16 playoff guys made up 12 of the top 13 positions. And that would have been 13 or like 14 of the top 15, of course, had Chase Elliott and Martin Truex Jr. not crashed out. The only guy that spoiled that party was, of course, the Darlington ace, Eric Jones, there in the 20 car, finishing 4th. But outside of that, Harvick, Dillon, Logano, Jones there in 4th, and then Byron, Bowman, the Busch brothers, Almirola, Boyer, Keselowski, Custer, Hamlin, all playoff guys. And so that's going to be the story once again. It's going to be the playoff guys making up a huge contingent of that top 10, if not all of it, and then further down into the top 15, making up a lot of that. So that's what I'm looking to. One final guy that I do want to mention in terms of an honorable mention or something along those lines is Eric Almirola. Really like the SHR speed on the 750 tracks. could be a really strong value usage here early in the playoffs with these 750 package races. Finished in the top 10 last year at this race in the playoffs. They need to get those playoff results early on, have had really strong 750 results this season when they haven't crashed. Of course, they did crash at Darlington, so there is that to keep in your mind. But I'm expecting a really solid day from SHR as a whole. That includes Chase Briscoe as well, who finished 11th here earlier this season.
Yeah, this could be a one weekend. If you're going to look for SHR to have a positive result, this is definitely
I'd actually stretch that out to this entire first round. Really like their prospects on the 750 package.
Okay. Bonus picks time. This is going to get extremely dicey, but you lead us off with the Top Chevrolet. Who do you think is going to be leading that pack here at Darlington?
Yeah, Top Chevy's fascinating because you've got three really strong guys, and Kyle Larson, who's been so great at Darlington, but then Chase Elliott, who probably should have won this race last season, has had a couple really strong runs at Darlington recently when he hasn't gotten to those crashes. And then William Byron, who had a really, really good run earlier this season and is of the Hendrick cars, the fastest in terms of median lap time on the 750 package. All of that being said, I am going to go with Kyle Larson as my top Chevrolet. Just too much potential there at Darlington Drivers Racetrack. All of it seems to be shaping up to be a very strong Kyle Larson weekend. So I've got him as my top Chevrolet.
I do as well. I would like to go with somebody else just to see what I could do, but I feel the most confident in Kyle Larson this weekend in terms of getting that result. They've just been too consistent so far this season. And despite their median lap speed being a little bit behind the likes of a William Byron in terms of the season long, I still think a driver's racetrack will kind of make that null and void to an extent. I think the driver ability for Kyle Larson and just the ability for Cliff Daniels to set up a race car, or no, not Cliff Daniels, Cliff Daniels, right? Yeah, I'm getting that right. Yep. There's so many different things that I'm going through my mind right now, but for Kyle Larson, I just like him as the favorite to lead that pack here this week. And it's going to be such an intense battle between Hendrick and Gibbs and maybe a Joey Logano or Kevin Harvick up there this weekend. It's really too close to call, but if I had to give the edge, I'm going to go with Larson for Chevy. For Ford, I think this one's simplest enough for me here. I'm going to go with Kevin Harvick just based off of previous success here at Darlington. Every time I go with Joey Logano, he disappoints me. So I'm going to go safer than sorry and say that Kevin Harvick backs up his Darlington performance in the spring and still has a solid result here once again here in the playoff opener at Darlington.
Yep, I've got Harvick as top Ford as well. Just simply put, I don't really see enough value from any of the Penske guys to really go out and use any of them for that distinction. Joey Logano has the speed, but didn't look great here earlier at Darlington, has kind of been up and down in his Darlington career. Brad Keselowski hasn't had the 750 speed this season, and Ryan Blaney just hasn't had those results yet in his career at Darlington to make him a decent pick. So honestly, I'd be looking at the SHR guys kind of, and Kevin Harvick is the clear favorite for that one. Finished 6th here earlier this season, has that really strong 750 speed. And so I'm expecting him to be up in that top 5 conversation all day long. He is easily my pick for top Toyota. Can't go other than Martin Truex Jr. He was too dominant here earlier this season, has been a great racetrack for him. Again, could have won this playoff race last season if it wasn't for that incident with Chase Elliott coming to those final laps of the race. And so for Martin Truex Jr., too fast of a race car for me to bet against from earlier this season. I'm expecting them to return to form here in the beginning of the playoffs. Truex is my top Toyota.
Yeah, I have him too. I mean, I hate to match you so much here, but I really did have Truex written down. I think
these are pretty straightforward for the bonus picks, at least until we get to manufacturer organization. That's where it gets really interesting. But for these ones, I think it's fairly straightforward.
Yeah, I do like the 19 car quite a bit this weekend. I think there's definitely if you want to go with a Hamlin or a Kyle Busch this weekend, I don't think that's entirely wrong either. But in terms of race winning capability, I give the edge to the 19 car, given what we've seen earlier this season on this track, on this package. It tracks more applicable to this. There's more speed to that 19 car than I think what meets the eye sometimes. And this is going to be a track where we really find out what the 19 car is made of. If he doesn't really show up here this weekend, that would be pretty concerning for me. If you're a Martin Truex Jr. fan, or if you have him going long in the playoffs, if he doesn't show up at Darlington, there may be a little bit more to this summer lull that they had this season. But Martin Truex Jr.'s top Toyota. Now this is really where it gets interesting.
And I am glad you're going first for this one.
Yeah. I don't like going first for this one, but I'm glad you're going to go first for the next one to see what you do for that one. Cause this one, I'm leaning towards a split. I will say that, like, if I'm going to go somewhere, I don't quite feel confident enough to go in on one. For
what it's worth, I split earlier this year at Darlington as well.
Yeah, I don't feel confident enough to go with a manufacturer and a organization that is from the same kind of make and model. If I'm going to lean somewhere, though, in terms of winning manufacturer, I think I'm going to go with Chevrolet. And just based off of their ability to close out races, they have more options than Toyota. Let's say Denny Hamlin doesn't quite have the speed this weekend, despite him being the fastest car on the 750 package, or Kyle Busch doesn't quite have it this weekend. I think the likes of a Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, and a William Byron will have enough to be a little bit more of an option towards that side of things than a Martin Truex Jr. kind of on his own, if that does end up being the case. But I think those 6 guys right there, it's really fine. It's slim pickings. It's really, really close, but I'm going to give the edge to a Chevrolet team that didn't win the race in the spring, but finished second behind Martin Truex Jr. and Kyle Larson. So I'll say that they get the winning manufacturer.
This is a tough one. I am going to go against you on this one. Split it. I'm going to go with Toyota as the top manufacturer for this one. And I'm just playing the numbers game on this one. Toyota's on the 750 package ranked 1st, 4th, 8th, and 9th in order: Hamlin, Truex, Busch, and then Bell, versus the Hendrick cars with the Chevys ranking 3rd with Byron, 5th with Larson, 7th with Elliott, and then 11th with Bowman. So just that slight edge in the speed for the Toyotas. Really like what Truex showed earlier this season, like Hamlin's speed at this racetrack. In addition to his talent there, Larson could easily spoil the show for myself and hand you the victory there. But I am going to go with Toyota for the manufacturer and double down on it with Joe Gibbs as the organization.
Wow. For me, I am going to go with Joe Gibbs Racing, though, for the winning organization. I think the race winning ability of Martin Truex Jr. is just the edge for me, but I think the overall consistency from the 3 other guys outweighs the other 3 from Joe Gibbs Racing. But the winning factor, I think, comes from the 19 car here this weekend. It just gives that slight edge for me here at Darlington. It's close. It's extremely close. This is probably one of the most uncertain weeks I've ever had to pick. I'm sure for you as well, between these 2 manufacturers and organizations.
First time I've really had to think about it in a while.
Right? You lean Chevrolet, you lean Hendrick, just based off of their overall performance and having 4 guys across the board that could go and win. This weekend, it's pretty close. You look at Bowman and Bell, you're splitting hairs a little bit between the 2. I'd probably give the advantage to Christopher Bell if I'm going to go out there on a limb, given their speed. But then you look at Kyle Busch and William Byron. Of course, the 2 differences in our lineup, I'd say that they're pretty close in terms of what they could potentially do here this weekend. Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin, really damn close. And then Martin Truex Jr. and Kyle Larson, probably as close as you can get. So it's really, really close between 2 fantastic organizations here this weekend. And who knows, Team Penske could go out there and win the race with Joey Logano. Stewart-Haas Racing could go out there and win the race with Kevin Harvick, and we could be looking stupid. But this is just playing the numbers game here when it comes to that. But yes, I'm going to go with Joe Gibbs Racing here as the winning organization. But Truck Series time. We're going to get to the winner picks here for this upcoming weekend. The Truck Series race on Sunday, kind of morning-ish in the afternoon before the Cup Series race. And for me,
you're not West Coast anymore. It's early afternoon, baby. 1:30 start time.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not used to that. But for me, this is a pretty self-explanatory one. It's hard to look at that early race because of how much carnage there was in the final 80 laps. But the guy that was leading before that carnage and got taken out on the restart by his teammate was John Hunter Nemechek. I say that he goes out there and gets a little bit of redemption here and gets his championship path right back on track after a sluggish gateway, having multiple issues throughout that race. I think he gets it going and wins and punches his ticket to the next round here at Darlington.
That's the guy I wanted. So there you go. Led 65 laps. He's a great pick there. Because don't forget, Darlington is where he kind of had his first breakout Cup Series run with Front Row Motorsports in the 38 there as well. So if there's a place that he's going to be very strong at, you have to assume it would be this place, because with that damaged truck as well, he still ended up finishing 8th place. Although when you look at the trucks behind him, not exactly a ton of competition there. For myself, I'll go with a bit of a swing. And funny enough, it's the same guy I went with last time, and it's Todd Gilliland. Like the speed in that Front Row Motorsports truck, led 17 laps last time out at Darlington, at Darlington. Some similar characteristics to Gateway, which he had a very, very strong run at last season. Didn't quite show that same speed at Gateway, but there was a lot of chaos at the end of that race, of course, as well. Starting to see a theme with the truck series in terms of chaos. But with Sheldon Creed having wrapped it up, I don't know where he's going to be in the conversation for this one. I think those guys are going to be in the conversation for the top 5. Ben Rhodes up there as well, having led 34 laps in that last race at Darlington as well. But I'll take the swing on Todd Gilliland to get things righted here in the playoffs.
I like it. If I'm going to give a shout out to somebody who could go out there and potentially win this race that I wouldn't have picked, but or I had the option to not pick him, so I wasn't going to. But if I did, I would pick Carson Hocevar. I think he could potentially be a really good candidate here to get his first Truck Series victory. Ran well here in the spring, finished third in this race, so could potentially be a sneaky play there.
And he's been talking about this race as being a big, big opportunity for that team as well. So definitely going to keep an eye on him this weekend. I'm excited to see what he can do this weekend for that one. For Xfinity, there's really not much to say. Denny Hamlin's running this race in the Xfinity series, so he's easily the pick for myself. There's really not much to say about it.
It's the clear-cut favorite. I mean, it's pointless for me to even pick a driver, but
Daniel Hemrick, then you won't.
I'm not going to.
Why not? Why not?
Because I don't think he's actually going to win this weekend. Because I think Hamlin's going to win this weekend.
Yeah, so then pick him. I just want to see you pick Daniel Hemrick once.
I don't know if I'll ever do that.
That would make my day.
I'll just go with the guy who won the spring race. I'll go with Justin Allgaier.
Boring.
Yeah, I know.
I say as I picked Denny Hamlin.
Yeah, so at least it's a little different, but yeah, I'm just going to go with the numbers here and just go with the guy that has been able to prove himself and win here. Brandon Jones, if he doesn't have as bad luck as he has this season, I would potentially look at him as an option because he won here last year in this crazy race between Ross Chastain and Denny Hamlin, where they both lost and wrecked each other. But there's still Ross Chastain in the field this time to really upset Denny Hamlin. I think this should be a clear-cut path to victory for him. But if it doesn't, I'll say Justin Allgaier is the guy to upset him here at Darlington. Cup Series winner. How
long are you going to try and stall for this one?
This is an extremely difficult one to pick. I hate going first for this one, to be honest. It really does pain me because I don't like leaving you some of these guys that I would easily.
You can't take multiple winners.
I know. I would love to just take like a bunch of 5 and then just hoard them, but I can't do that, obviously.
I'd still beat you.
Probably. So the way you've kind of gone about it strategically, it makes me think that you're not going to go all in Joe Gibbs Racing. It makes me think that you're going to go with the Hendrick guy because you've gone heavy with those two, but then to cover your bases, you're probably going to go with Kyle Larson, right? That's what you're thinking. I'm pretty confident in thinking that you think, and then
you might be on the right path
because you think I'm going to take Martin Truex Jr., right? That would be the most logical way to go about this and say that he wins once again here at Darlington and goes basically 2 for 2 this season. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to take Martin Truex Jr. here. I can't leave you him. You're going to probably take you're going to take Kyle Larson most likely, and that really scares me. And it's just so close between the two of them. But I'm just going to give the edge to the 19 car and their 750 speed, their ability to execute here, and his previous results here at Darlington. Could have, should have, would have, maybe won the race last season. Chase Elliott was right there at the end, was probably faster than him, maybe, but Truex was going for the pass there at the end. So it's really, really close between the two of them. But I'm going to lean Martin Truex Jr. here, play the numbers game, go with Chevrolet as the more manufacturer odds, but then stick with my Joe Gibbs Racing and say that they win as an organization, and then go with him as the winner with Martin Truex Jr.
Well, if Truex wins, then you only get 5 points out of it because I have the Toyota manufacturer. So I'm at least content with it because I did want Martin Truex Jr. as the winner pick for this one. But I will happily take Kyle Larson as a runner up for this one. I was looking at Kevin Harvick last year.
You'd only gain 5 points, right?
One. What's that?
You'd only gain 5 points on this one as well, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Because you've got Chevy there.
It's so close between us this weekend. It's going to come down to like single digit numbers probably.
Which is why I like the idea of not being able to pick the same driver. But anyways, for Kyle Larson here, he's the clear number 2 option. He's got the best average points haul of drivers in the Cup Series over the last 6 races. Granted, 3 of those he wasn't participating in. But when he goes to Darlington, he's consistently at the front. He did it with Chip Ganassi Racing. There's no reason to believe that he won't be able to do it again with Hendrick Motorsports and do so with more reliability and not have to push the car as much. Top 5 median lap time speed with the 750 package. I think that he's going to have a lot of competition from the rest of those Joe Gibbs guys. I really thought about going Denny Hamlin for this one, but just the fact that he hasn't won the season just can't quite put him there. But I'll go Kyle Larson for this one, and I think we'll get a nice battle going on Sunday night in a nice little kind of throwback race. Even though we don't have the schemes, it'll be nice to watch guys actually have to wheel the cars with a lot of horsepower on the track that doesn't want you to do so.
No, this is one of my favorite races of the season, despite it being a bit long and it drags on. This is a driver's racetrack. That's a beautiful
thing, though. Like it's one thing if a race drags on and it's the 550 package and there's no passing and it's slow and blah, blah, blah. It's a whole different thing to me when you can appreciate and you're a race fan that appreciates the talent that it takes to drive these cars. And you can see the onboards and you can see through the windshield of the guys trying to hold on to the car and trying to modulate the throttle and all those kind of things. That's the kind of racing that I think a lot of people that have been long-term fans and are hardcore fans really enjoy. And I'm glad that they'll get that opportunity to watch that this weekend for 500 miles at Darlington.
Tire fall off going to be a massive thing as always here this weekend.
It'll be 2 seconds plus. That's going to be a big part of strategy.
Yeah, and green flag pit stops are always treacherous here at Darlington. It's probably one of, if not the most difficult to get on and off a pit road, just given the banking difference and how you want to approach it. But it comes down to green flag pit stops a lot of times here on the strategy in that final stage on how many times do you want to pit, 3 or 2 times. It's just a lot of different ways to go about it with strategy. How much will that new turn 2 repavement impact the overall racing product here this weekend? I'm fascinated to see what happens with this race this weekend, and it's going to be one heck of a playoff opener. I'm really happy that it is the playoff opener. Chicagoland was great. It was a fantastic 1.5 mile race if you're going to open up a playoffs, but Darlington has a lot more historic value, and it's a great track to really get the playoffs underway. It feels like a special event here, no matter what it is, if we're running special paint schemes or not. So at least we get a couple. We get a couple. But any final thoughts before we wrap up our fantasy preview here today, Kyle?
Yeah, just a fun weekend coming up. Darlington is such a great track. It was cool to see them get 2 dates back. I think we could see them go back to 1 date next season and kind of have the throwback weekend all together at the beginning of the playoffs. I wouldn't hate that as a scenario if it means adding a couple new racetracks, specifically new ovals to the circuit. But for this season, having 2 Darlington races, one during the day, one during the night, is going to be really fun to see. Wish we had more throwback schemes, but it is going to be nice to see some of those typical schemes we get to see under the lights for quite a few weeks as well. Daytona under the lights last time out as well. This entire first round and the first race of the second round as well, all under the lights. Is kind of little night stretch that we get here to start the playoffs. Should be a lot of fun.
Pretty insane stretch here. This is probably one of my.
I don't hate having the day to actually do stuff and then get to watch the race at night.
This is probably one of my favorite stretches of the whole season here. It goes from the Daytona regular season finale to the Darlington race. Richmond's been kind of, but then Bristol cannot wait for Bristol,
which we didn't actually get this year. So.
We are getting a full Bristol race. I don't care what you say. Yeah. This Bristol track is the best track on the Cup Series calendar by far, by none. I'm sorry.
By far.
Yeah. For me, it's just unbelievably fantastic. And then
is it because your guy wins there a lot?
Hey, even if he didn't, it doesn't hurt. Yeah. But then you got Vegas, and then you go into the stressfulness of that round of 12. Lots of action coming up over the next couple of weeks here, and we will have you covered here at the Green Flag. And speaking at the Green Flag, make sure to follow us at on Instagram at the Green Flag Pod, as well as Twitter at the Green Flag Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave a like on this video. If you enjoyed it, we'd really, really appreciate it. We'll leave a link to the NASCAR on TSN page there this weekend as well. Going to be covering that for myself on that page. Going to be doing some graphics and stuff like that, trying to spice that up. So make sure you go check that page out and give it a follow. And we're going to have an exciting race this weekend at Darlington. But for this episode, I've been Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman, signing off for now. We will talk to you next week to get you set up for Richmond. Enjoy Darlington. Enjoy the playoffs, everybody.